All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Jimmy T Podcast, and I'm here as always with my co-host Ogar.
What's up, everybody?
And we're here to break down another week of UCF sports and events, most notably the game down in Tampa at Raymond James Stadium, the War-On-I4 against the Bulls.
Yeah, another loss for UCF against the Bulls.
It was a tough game, but a hard-fought game nonetheless, and it just that the Knights just aren't quite there yet. And it was a great reflection, as the announcers for the game did point out, that USF was in a very similar scenario with Willie Taggart, their head coach, when he took over a handful of years ago. They had a 2-win season, not like 3 years ago, so not too long ago. And then they were able to kind of bounce back with their new coach to kind of create a new system and culture in their university to create what you're now seeing, which was their first ever 10-win season as a program, and almost were able to compete for an American Athletic Conference title. So it's something that the Knights want to, at least in that kind of part for change, emulate, and I think they're onto a good track with that.
Yeah, Coach Frost is on the right track. He started a young QB again for experience.
Yes, and that was a storyline that kind of happened throughout the game, that Milton's play was not fantastic, arguably. It started off very well. He was 3 for 4 on the first drive. The Knights went down and scored within like a minute 30 to start off the game, and it took an early 7-0 lead over the Bulls. And then after that, USF's offense, as we did note last week, came to play, as they did with talented players in Quentin Flowers and Marlon Mack. And those were I think those two were the stars of the game, at least on the USF side of the ball. And that was the difference in this game, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, Quentin Flowers had outrageous passing numbers, 152, and then rushing another 152.
Yes, the rushing is where he's very dangerous, because it's his arm strength and throwing, I think I've noted before, is nothing to be amazed by, but his running ability is insane.
Yeah.
His escapability is an understatement. And the same with Marlon Mack, that is able to do a little bit of everything: power back, speed, catching the ball out of the backfield. And the Knights got to see that front row, and ultimately paid for it with towards the end of the game, started to get tired. Some arm tackles started to pop out, and great players like that are going to take advantage of it and make you look silly, and that's what they did. And what didn't help towards the end of the game was Milton's turnovers came back in full force with the first interception, I will say, was poor luck was a pinball deflection where it hit a defensive end's arm and then went straight to the middle linebacker's hands, which is, what are you going to do? But then Milton came back the very next throw, and had a not favorable long ball that ended up going short and was picked off. And then later he received the pull from Coach Frost and ended up having Justin Holman come in.
Yeah, the fumble also along with that.
Yeah, it was hard. It was a game where, as we did mention last week, that the Knights do not have a lot of margin for error, and this game especially, with better talent than even Tulsa, that you can't get behind the chains and you can't turn over the ball and expect to beat a very good team in South Florida.
Yeah, at one point they were almost on the comeback. It was 24-31.
Yep.
So that was the optimistic time.
Yes, they fought back behind behind a trick play with Peyton throwing a long ball to Traquan Smith, and then an almost completed onside kick attempt, which they ended up kind of getting back in a sense, because Rodney Adams did fumble later on that drive where the Knights got it. But it was almost huge momentum swing with them only down by 7 points to go down and try and tie it. But ultimately, with just not making enough plays at the end of the game with a small margin for error, you're not going to be able to pull those out.
Yeah, and one thing I saw, Milton didn't get to run, and if he can't pass, he usually runs. So now he couldn't run either.
USF speed was able to really keep him in check. But the story for the game for UCF offensively, which is something I've mentioned multiple times before, was Traquan Smith, that he had a heavy amount of involvement with this game, with just amazing numbers: 7 catches for 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. An amazing day, and it's something that UCF needs to build off of going forward into the bowl game, even though it looked like he had a hamstring pull, which he should be fine come, it looks like, December 17th for the Cure Bowl, even though it isn't officially announced. It looks like what the Knights are going to get. That he needs to get healthy, and he needs to be a focal point of the offense going forward, as he kind of has been in certain games. But I think he really stood out in this game.
Yeah, this game for sure. He had the long one, the 72-yard.
Yes, from Peyton, which was a beautiful play.
That was, Peyton might be going to quarterback
that was
next year.
The best throw all day by a UCF player, and it's not good when that's not a quarterback. But it just was a great play and almost changed the tide of the game entirely to put that momentum in UCF's hands, but they weren't able to take advantage as then the turnovers later in the game kind of defined the game. But I think it is something for next year to remember, as South Florida did pile on some touchdowns at the end to make the game look a lot nicer than it was, because it was actually a relatively close game and a tightly contested game for majority of it, but some late touchdowns and field goals tacked on by South Florida tried to make it look like it was not. But it's something to remember for next year, because this game is not going to go away anytime soon, as we did see with the amazing trophy they debuted.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, that was a great one.
It was a great trophy, and hopefully we'll be able to take it home next year, as I believe the game will be here next year. So hopefully we'll just keep it here when USF brings it down, and we'll just kind of go from there. And the thing is, for the Knights, while our quest for 6 ended right at 6, and we went 6-6. It was a good year as a bounce-back year, and it's something to just kind of build off of. And I think that's what the Knights needed this year, was hope. And I think Coach Frost was able to do that, to be able to get this group of seniors and freshmen really together and being able to push forward with a common goal of achieving a bowl game. And I think that they were able to do that. And we'll talk more about the bowl game after it's been announced, and we'll kind of go from there. And for some other sports that ended up going on this week, as we did mention, it ended up happening after we recorded last week, but the UCF basketball game against Villanova, which was not a win, but I think it was what we wanted and kind of what we were looking for out of the Knights, which was a closely contested game. I think they lost 66-55 or something along those lines.
It was in the first half going into the beginning of the second half. It was a close game, actually.
That's what the Knights needed with the defending national champions. With playing them in a neutral site. I think that's something to build off of for Johnny Dawkins there, to kind of look forward, to kind of say, like, look, we're able to compete against these guys. So look, when this past Saturday, the Seattle Redhawks come into town, we need to beat the crap out of these guys because we showed that we're able to play with this high-level talent. Let's continue on and let's beat the crappy teams that get put in front of us. And ultimately, they will play in the American Athletic Conference. We just need to take advantage of those crappy teams as our quest for 6 is our quest for 20 to be able to get a March Madness bid.
So what's one player you liked coming on the basketball team?
I mean, one player it's hard not to like is BJ Taylor, them coming back off the foot injury from last year. And it just has been that leader and that strong leadership presence that I think the Knights were missing last year on the court. And it just coming where he's doing a little bit of everything. He's assisting other players. He's scoring. He's scoring from the free throw line, which is something that can be very underrated and often forgotten about in games.
He went 10 for 10.
10 for 10 from the free throw line. That's nuts. And that's amazing as a leader on your team to be able to do that. That's a trait you need in your best player, and that's what BJ Taylor is doing for the Knights as well. And other guys that are just kind of stepping up is a lot of bench players.
Yeah.
Where one was kind of a bit of a highlight play where he didn't have a super flashy day, but Chad Brown, number 21 for the Knights, he did have a great dunk, which then ended up him headbutting the backboard. And it's just big plays, big flashy plays, and that's what they need from the bench this year.
Yeah, like extra input from the bench.
Yes, that's something huge for teams. Where you look to the NBA, you look to college basketball, it's normally what your sixth man or your guys on the bench that are able to come in when guys like a BJ Taylor, a Taco Fall are tired.
Yes.
That you kind of are just like, this guy's able to come in and there's not much of a drop-off in play because that's a big difference, and you're able to keep those guys fresh.
Yeah.
And it's just something to watch as you want to pay attention to these bench guys. Like even Tankafani, who was a guy, he didn't really play that much last year, at least as far as I remember from watching the games. That wasn't a name that stood out. And he's been able to kind of come back this year, and he's been scoring a lot of points. I mean, that's something that's underrated, where you kind of have these guys step up. And that's something that I think on the basketball side that a lot of guys, these older guys are playing right now. They need to be developing these younger guys to come in.
Yeah, because the turnaround starts now, so eventually everything's going to turn around. So you put UCF back on top. ACC
that's something that, especially with the AAC, is that there's a lot. It's top heavy with teams where you have a talented Connecticut program that's always good every single year, and a couple other programs that are pretty solid in their own right. But there's a lot of openings for teams to kind of step up and make some great plays and make a great season out of their year. And that's something that the Knights, I think, are very capable to do. But what I want to watch for them this year is have a lot of younger guys step up. Because you can kind of get into a lull with programs, and I can see that a little bit with our current program for the Knights is that to rely on senior players and even some grad transfers, which is something that you just can't rely on because you get into just an unhealthy cycle to where your program doesn't develop because you're having an older player coming in for just a season, taking up a spot of what could be a young player.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, I would imagine Coach Dawkins is not going to get himself into that cycle. Just kind of coming in, you want to have a couple guys that understand your system and kind of play the way you want to play to kind of get your program off to the right start. But you need to eventually take the training wheels off of these grad transfers and gotta let the program go. You gotta let them work and be able to develop up because otherwise you're not going to have a competitive program. Yeah. And that's something also to watch with the football team as well, because a lot of older players where we need to develop and have that, and that's just across the board.
That's why Milton's playing, actually.
Yes, that's exactly why is we complain about Milton every single week, but it's something important that Frost sees is because the team he just left this year, Oregon, is going to be firing their head coach because he's been relying on grad transfers at the quarterback position for too long now, and eventually you just get guys that don't necessarily fit your system but are just coming to play for 1 year, and you don't have that relationship with your teammates and just that kind of just rapport to be able to perform well, because relationships are key, especially when you're leading an offense at quarterback. And it's something that if Coach Frost wants to keep a job and eventually if UCF's not able to push themselves up, if he wants to go somewhere else, his program's got to be able to naturally grow, and that is why he's doing that with Milton, as frustrating as it can be from time to time.
Oh, most definitely.
But for the Knights, I think for the basketball, go back to basketball, that I think being able to pull off a nice win against Seattle is another home win, especially coming off a successful Charleston tournament classic. I don't know. Being able to come off a successful tournament run, then to kind of come home and pick up some W's as we get closer and closer to AAC play, that I think it's good. And just remember, we're looking for 20 wins this year. All right, and then before we fully get to the end of our show today, we will briefly go over our picks, which unfortunately did not go my way this week.
Another win for me.
Whatever, 6-3 for the year so far, and we do, because the difference for us, even though we both picked the Washington State game correctly, we did the Michigan and Florida games, which were the big deciding factor between the two of us. And they were great games, and there was something to watch and look for next week. But what we will look into is a lot of conference championship games will be going on, and the first game is the Colorado-Washington game for the Pac-12.
I would like to see Colorado win it.
Colorado has been on quite a tear, but for the sake of that, I think Washington has some college football playoff hopes if they're able to solidly win this game over a competitive Colorado Buffaloes?
Yeah,
is that what they are? The Buffaloes. The Buffaloes. They have a great win over them. I think they can make a college football playoffs push, and I will pick Washington. And then we will take it to our AAC championship game, which is Temple against Navy. Should be a very interesting game.
Yeah,
who do you like?
I think Navy has this one in the bag.
I will go Temple just because they've been a thorn in everyone's sides all year, and they've turned it on when it's come to conference play. And I think if their defense is able to slow Navy's offense down enough, I think offensively they'll be able to take advantage of Navy. And so I say Temple ends up winning the AAC, as sad as it is to have me say that. And then the last game we will talk about, which is not the biggest Big Ten game this year, but it is the Big Ten championship, which is Wisconsin versus Penn State.
I actually need Wisconsin to win that game. I'd need it for Ohio State to be in the playoff.
I don't like Penn State, even remotely. I've shared my opinions a lot elsewhere, especially if you follow me on Twitter, you know my opinions. But I will go Penn State. They've been on an amazing run, and I would like to see Ohio State suffer because all of their fans were really annoying yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. Don't come to my house yesterday.
I will go Penn State just for the sake of making things a little more interesting in the college football playoffs decisions that go into next week. And then for a just brief rundown of events, I don't think there's anything super major event-wise coming up. Get ready for finals.
Light Up UCF is still going on.
Light Up UCF is still going on, so you can still be able to get tickets for that. Just a brief I'll just talk about it briefly, was that Las Vegas announced their new NHL team, which was the Golden Knights. Okay. It's interesting, though the UCF Knights Twitter account did have some fun with that and actually went as far to name their Twitter account not the Golden Knights, as the Knights have been referred to that multiple times on national television, much to the disapproval of the university. So the university poked some fun with that and kind of jumped on to a popular little news story throughout the week. As for anything else, I don't think we have anything.
Yeah, that's about it from us.
Nope. And so just don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Share it with all of your friends.
Follow us on Twitter.
Yes, follow us on Twitter. This has been another episode of the Jimmy T Podcast. We'll see you next week.
See ya.